Picture this scenario. 1815. Napoleon is defeated. The British Empire is at the peak of its power. Foreign diplomats gather in Vienna to reshape the world. On the table lies a map, and everyone is arguing about the British pound sterling. No one doubts it. It is eternal. It is unshakable. Britain rules the world and the seas. Its currency is law. Fast forward 100 years. 1913. Economist Norman Angell writes a book called The Great Illusion. His argument shocks the world. The economic interdependence between nations is so strong that no one will ever go to war. War has become impossible because of trade. 4 years later, World War I began. Now fast forward another 100 years. The 1990s. End of the Cold War. Fukuyama speaks of the end of history. The dollar has become the global currency. All economists are convinced this will last forever. No competition. No end. But now, October 2025. Right now, something is changing. Quickly, quietly, but radically. And here's the question. What if history is repeating itself? What if every time economists are sure of the eternity of something, that something dies? Hold on. Before we dive into this research, I need to know something. Where are you joining from, and what time is it there right now? Country, city, local time. Put it all in the comments below. I really want to see how global this is. Over the last 350 years, 5 major world currencies have emerged and disappeared from the world stage. These are not just numbers in textbooks. These are stories of the fall of empires, wars, revolutions, and economic collapses. And the most terrifying part? Every single time, people did not see this coming end. Let's start at the beginning, 1815. After the Napoleonic Wars, the world needed stability. Europe was destroyed. A currency was needed that everyone would trust, and that currency became the British pound sterling. Why the pound? Because behind it stood real power, the British Empire's fleet, its industry, its gold. The pound was not born by accident. It was born from the ashes of war as a symbol of stability. Here's what's interesting. The British Empire didn't tell the world that the pound was a reserve currency. It just happened. Merchants in India, traders in America, bankers in Europe, they all began storing their wealth in pounds. Because it worked. Because there was power behind the pound. But power changes. Worlds turn. The thing is, few people remember the currencies that existed before the British pound. But they did exist. And their collapses teach us something very important. Take Holland in the late 1600s. The Dutch florin ruled trade as absolutely as the British pound ruled in 1900. Holland was the greatest trading power. Its merchants controlled sea routes. Its banks financed kingdoms. Its florin was everywhere. And here's what happened. Holland did not die in war. It was not conquered. No. It was defeated economically. Britain simply grew faster. Its industry was more powerful. Its fleet was larger. Its empire was bigger. And people began to trust the British pound more than the Dutch florin. No one announced that the Dutch florin was no longer a reserve currency. It just happened. People began moving their savings. Ship owners began demanding pounds instead of florins. Banks began asking for pounds for loans. And then, suddenly, the Dutch florin simply disappeared from global trade. The same will happen to the dollar. It won't happen overnight. It will happen gradually, slowly, imperceptibly. People will move their money. Countries will demand other currencies for trade. And one day the world will discover that the dollar is yesterday's news. The Spanish real is a different story. Spain controlled America and its gold. The Spanish real was literally backed by gold from the New World. It was the most reliable asset in the medieval world. The Spanish real was everywhere, from Asia to Europe, from Africa to America. But Spanish gold ran out. The gold from the colonies dried up. And when the gold ran out, faith in the real ended. This is a very important moment. A currency is not held up by words. It is held up by something material, by gold, by commodities, by power. Now let's look at how Britain rose. 1815. Britain defeated France. Its fleet ruled the seas. Its industry produced cloth, steel, coal faster than any other country. Britain became the factory of the world, and the British pound sterling became the currency that people believed in. But here's what was key. Britain didn't just create the pound, it created the gold standard. In 1821, Britain officially established that anyone could exchange paper pounds for real gold at the Bank of England. This was a revolutionary step. It meant that the pound was not just a word, not just a promise. It was a promise backed by gold. The gold standard was a stroke of genius because it gave people confidence. If you have pounds, you know you can go to the bank and get gold. Gold doesn't lie. Gold doesn't change. Gold is faith in physical form. And so the whole world began using pounds. From Russia to Japan, from Australia to Canada, everyone held pounds. Why? Because pounds could be exchanged for gold. Because the pound had English industry behind it. Because the British fleet protected the sea routes through which trade flowed. The pound ruled the world for 100 years. This was the age of Britannica. Queen Victoria, the Industrial Revolution, political stability. The pound was a symbol of eternity. But nothing is eternal. The First World War destroyed the world. Europe was in ruins. Britain, too. Britain spent its gold on war. Britain spent its resources. And after the war, the world realized that Britain could no longer guarantee the gold standard. In 1925, British Finance Minister Winston Churchill made a fateful decision. He announced that Britain would return to the gold standard. But there was one problem. There was no gold. Or rather, there wasn't enough. Churchill simply overvalued the pound, said it was worth more gold than it actually was. It was a lie, a beautiful lie, but a lie. And what happened? People began demanding their pounds back in exchange for gold. The Bank of England began losing gold. One by one, countries abandoned the pound. France demanded gold. America demanded gold. Gold left Britain like water through fingers. And in 1931, the unthinkable happened. Britain abandoned the gold standard. No, it didn't announce it formally. It just closed the gold standard. Said that from now on, pounds would no longer be exchanged for gold. Period. It was a shock. The world was in panic. If Britain, the greatest empire, couldn't guarantee gold, what would happen to its currency? What would happen to trade? But here's what's interesting. The pound didn't fall dead. It fell, but not to death. Because Britain still stood behind it. Its industry, its fleet, its political system. People still believed in the British pound, simply because they believed in Britain. The Second World War was the end of the British Empire, though no one wanted to see it. 1944. The war is still going on, but it's already clear who will win. America has never been more powerful. Its industry produced tanks, planes, ships, more than all other countries combined. America was not destroyed by war because the war took place across the seas. Its gold reserves grew. Its debt did not. And so the Americans, the British, and other allies gathered in Bretton Woods, in a small town in New Hampshire. There they decided what the post-war financial system would be. American economist John Maynard Keynes proposed creating one global currency. It was a brilliant idea. One currency for the whole world. No wars over currency advantages, no crises. But the Americans didn't agree. The Americans proposed something else. The dollar. The dollar would become the reserve currency. People would hold dollars. Dollars would be exchanged for gold in America. The gold standard, but now based on the dollar instead of the pound. The British didn't want to accept this. For them, it meant the end. The end of the British Empire as the financial center of the world. But they had no choice. The Americans were too strong. American gold was too vast. The American army was too powerful. And so the Bretton Woods system was born. The dollar instead of the pound. America instead of Britain. Gold at $35 per ounce. The world sighed with relief. Finally, stability. Finally, a system. Finally, clarity. But it was an illusion. The 1960s. America looks invincible. Its GDP is growing, its army is huge, its technology is cutting edge. America is the new Britain. The dollar is the new pound. Everything is stable. But here's what happened. America began spending money. A lot. On the Vietnam War, on social programs, on space. America printed more and more dollars to finance its spending. And foreign countries began to notice something. They began demanding to exchange their dollars for American gold. Because they understood, there was less American gold than promises. France, under President de Gaulle, in 1965, directly accused America of fraud. De Gaulle said, "I demand gold." Just like that. He simply demanded it. And gold began flowing out of the USA. France demanded gold, Britain demanded gold, Switzerland demanded gold. America's gold reserves began to melt. And America, it did what Britain did in 1931. It prepared itself for denial. August 15th, 1971. President Richard Nixon went on the air. He announced a shock. The Nixon shock. America would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The gold standard was dead. The world was shocked. If the dollar was no longer backed by gold, what backed it? What stood behind the dollar? What stood behind the American currency? The answer was faith. Only faith. And here's where something amazing happened. The dollar didn't fall. The dollar rose. Why? Because America announced that the dollar would be backed by oil. America made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil would be sold in dollars, and people would need dollars to buy oil. This was a brilliant remake. Instead of gold, oil. Instead of a physical metal, black gold in the ground. Comment. How many patterns did you know? 1973. War in the Middle East. Israel and Arab countries are fighting. America supports Israel. Saudi Arabia and OPEC are offended. They announced an embargo. No oil for the West. Not a drop. And the world felt the pain. In America, people stood in lines at gas stations. In Europe, they turned off the lights. Oil prices soared. But then something amazing happened. America made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Here's our deal. You will sell oil in dollars. That is, in American currency. And we will protect you. We will place our troops in your country. We will make sure no one attacks you. You will be rich. We will control the global oil trade. Saudi Arabia agreed. And so the petrodollar was born. Oil was now sold in dollars. This meant that every country needed dollars to buy oil. This meant that the dollar became even more important than before. This meant that without dollars, you had no energy. This was brilliant politics. Not a gold standard, not some generally accepted rules. Just power and a deal. America declared, "The dollar is the world's currency because oil is sold in dollars, and oil is the lifeblood of the entire modern economy." Smash that like button. From 1973 to 2020, the dollar ruled almost completely. This was a period of American hegemony. Every country needed dollars. Every country held dollar reserves. Every country was stockpiling dollars. Why? Because without the dollar, you couldn't buy oil. Without oil, you couldn't develop your economy. The economy depended on oil. Oil depended on the dollar. It was a perfect system for America. America could print dollars with almost no limits. The world accepted these dollars. The world worked for dollars. And dollars flowed back to America. But the system had a crack. A very big crack. The more dollars America printed, the cheaper those dollars became. The more debt America accumulated, the less reliable the dollar seemed. And so, very slowly, alternatives began to emerge. The euro was born in 1999. The European Union decided to create its own currency, a currency that doesn't depend on America, a currency that can compete with the dollar. And the euro began to rise, never threatening the dollar directly, but gradually becoming increasingly important. 2008 was a turning point, but no one noticed it. America fell into a financial crisis. Its banks collapsed, its system collapsed, and America printed trillions of dollars to save itself. This was normal, economists said. It was an emergency situation. The system needed to be saved. But the Chinese noticed. They saw that the dollar was no longer so reliable. They saw that America could just print money endlessly. They understood. It was time to diversify. China began buying gold. Not a little, but rapidly. Gold from African mines, from Australian pits, gold from all over the world flowed to China. Why? Because China was preparing. Preparing for the day when the dollar would lose value. Preparing for the day when a different currency would be needed. And now, October 2025. Right now, as you're watching this. In July 2023, something happened that few people noticed. But by now, 18 months later, it's impossible to ignore. Saudi Arabia refused to renew its agreement with America. The agreement that was signed in 1974. A 51-year agreement that just ended. Saudi Arabia said no. And it began selling oil in other currencies. In Chinese yuan, in Indian rupees, in other currencies. This was the end of the petrodollar. Not an instant end, but an end. And here's what happened next. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These are countries that make up more than half the world's population. They created an alternative currency system. They began trading in national currencies instead of dollars. France and Europe began talking about independence from America in financial terms. The European Commission launched projects to reduce dependence on the dollar. India, which was one of the main dollar holders, began demanding payments in rupees instead of dollars. The world is slowly but surely transitioning to other currencies. This is not a new pound, not a new gold coin. This is a multipolar system where there is no one dominant currency. Let's look at the patterns. Because patterns are everything. The Spanish real lost dominance when Spanish gold ran out. The process took about 150 years. 1500, Spain at its peak. 1750, Spain in decline. The Dutch florin lost dominance when Holland could no longer compete with Britain industrially. It was a quiet collapse. People just moved their money to British banks. The process took about 100 years. The British pound lost dominance when Britain spent its gold on war. After 1945, the pound's position collapsed in just 15 to 20 years. It was a fast collapse. The dollar is now beginning to lose dominance because America has accumulated enormous debt, printed endless dollars, and people have begun to understand that the dollar is no longer reliable. It's the same story. A story about a currency that is born from power, rules the world, becomes arrogant, loses its foundation, and then collapses. Every time a country prints too much currency, inflation begins. Every time a currency loses value, people look for alternatives. Every time people look for alternatives, a new system emerges. And it all starts again. Here's how it looks in numbers. In 1945, America owned 60% of the world's gold. 60% of all the gold in the world. This was absolute hegemony. Today, America owns approximately 7 to 8% of the world's gold. In absolute numbers, that's 8,133 tons of gold. But that's no longer a dominant position. It's just another major gold holder. Meanwhile, China has accumulated gold reserves from nearly zero in the 1990s to approximately 2,000 tons today. And that's just official figures. Real figures are much higher because China is buying gold covertly through third countries, through intermediaries, through African mines. The share of the dollar in countries' global reserves was 59% in 1995. Today, it's approximately 58%. A slow but steady decline. And this decline is accelerating. The euro was 13% in 1999. Today, it's approximately 20%. Growth. The euro is becoming a real alternative to the dollar. The yen, the pound, the yuan, the rupee, they're all growing. Slowly, but growing. This is not a collapse of the dollar in one day. This is a slow displacement of the dollar from its position. In 2020, cross-border payments in dollars made up approximately 50% of all global cross-border payments. By 2024, it was 45%. Now in 2025, we're seeing it drop further. This is not a temporary blip anymore. This is a clear, accelerating trend. U.S. federal debt in 1995 was $4 trillion. That was enormous. But it was a debt that made sense for an economy. Today, U.S. federal debt is $34 trillion. But wait, that figure was from 2024. In October 2025, as we're speaking, that number has grown to $36 trillion. The debt is accelerating. It's growing faster than anyone predicted. $2 trillion added in just 1 year. $2 trillion. If we look at history, we see a pattern. First empire, Spanish Empire with the real, approximately 1500 to 1750. Second empire, Dutch Empire with the florin, approximately 1650 to 1800. Third empire, British Empire with the pound, approximately 1815 to 1944. And now, American Empire with the dollar, approximately 1944 to today. The Chinese yuan is strengthening. The Indian rupee is growing. The Brazilian real is becoming more significant. The European euro is strengthening its position. World trade is dividing into regional blocks, each with its own currency or currency exchange system. This is the end of the era of one reserve currency. But it's not the end of money. It's not the end of trade. It's not the end of capitalism. It's simply a different order. An order in which there is no single center. An order in which power is distributed among several players. Instead of hegemony, polycentrism. Instead of one ruler, several leaders. Instead of the dollar triad, currency pluralism. Here's the main question everyone wants to hear. When will the dollar collapse? The honest answer is, maybe never, or not in the way you imagine. The dollar won't collapse like the Spanish real, which simply disappeared. The dollar won't collapse like the British pound, which lost its position almost immediately after the war. The dollar will fall slowly, gradually, over decades. It will be a process, not an event. People don't like this. People want an exact date. 2027, 2030, collapse, a concentrated moment. But history doesn't work that way. History works slowly, imperceptibly, until you look back and realize that everything has changed. Here's what will happen. The share of other currencies in global trade will gradually increase. More and more transactions will be conducted in euros, in yuan, in national currencies. The dollar will remain important, but not the only one, not the main one. The dollar may remain the currency of the United States and some of its allies, much like the pound remains the currency of Britain. But it will be a regional currency, not a global reserve currency. Most people don't see this because the change is happening too slowly. When a tree falls, it happens in seconds. But before the tree falls, it rots for years, imperceptibly from the inside. The same with currencies. The system falls slowly, imperceptibly. You wake up, and the dollar is still everywhere. You read the news, and the dollar is still strong. You go to the store, and prices are still in dollars. But in the foundation of the system, changes are taking place. Countries are moving reserves into gold. Countries are creating alternative payment systems. Countries are demanding payments in national currencies. And here's the key insight. The process is irreversible. Not because of some grand conspiracy, not because some evil force is destroying the dollar, but because of basic economic logic. Because diversification is safer than concentration. Because power in the hands of one player is unstable. This is why the transition will happen. Not overnight, not spectacularly, but inevitably. Now let's talk about what this means for you, for your money, for your future. First conclusion. The world financial system is fundamentally changing. This is not a temporary fluctuation. This is not a market cycle. This is a structural transformation that happens once every 100 years or so. You are living through one of these rare historical moments. The rules are changing. The currencies that matter are diversifying. The power that controls global trade is being redistributed. If you hold your wealth purely in dollars, you are betting everything on the continuation of American dominance. That's a risky bet. Second conclusion. Alternative currencies and assets will become more important. Gold will continue to rise in value. The yuan, the euro, the rupee will become more sought after. Cryptocurrencies, for all their volatility, represent a shift away from traditional reserve currencies. The future will be more diverse, more distributed, less centered on a single currency. This doesn't mean the dollar will become worthless. It means the dollar will be one currency among many instead of the currency. And that's a significant difference. Third conclusion. This transition will create both risks and opportunities. The risks are obvious: financial instability, inflation, geopolitical tensions. But the opportunities are real, too. The rise of alternative currencies means alternative economic systems. It means the possibility of a more balanced world order. It means the end of American financial dominance, but also the beginning of a more multipolar world. Here's my warning. Don't be caught off guard. Don't be like those people in 1913 who believed that war was impossible. Don't be like those in the 1990s who believed the dollar would rule forever. History repeats because people forget the lessons of history. Start thinking about diversification, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Understand that the world is changing. Understand that the currencies that matter are shifting. Understand that the financial order you grew up with is being replaced by something new. But also understand this. The transition from one reserve currency to another is not a collapse. It's a transformation. It's painful, yes, but it's also an opportunity. For those who understand what's happening, who adapt, who prepare, there will be opportunities. Thanks for watching till the end. If you're here, you're one of those who want to understand how the financial system really works. Subscribe, new research tomorrow. And drop a comment. What do you think about this? Your perspective matters.